those people who feel intimidated by your authenticity and, people who are different than they are, they're the ones who need more time for self-reflection on what they're experiencing. Don't let them take away your light, your energy, your excitement. You being too much has more to do with them, for sure. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast, where we talk about everything ADHD and scapegoating. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to talk about how ADHD affects communication and why speaking up can be a double-edged sword, plus an overview of struggles, excessive talking, justice sensitivity, curiosity, and calling out abuse.
Yeah. So probably everyone who has been diagnosed with ADHD, one of the biggest things is they talk all the time or they talk a lot. So why do ADHDers struggle with talking? So there's a bunch of different things that go on, but the fast brain processing comes with excitement. So ADHDers often interrupt or talk excessively, and not because they're rude or needing attention. But I definitely know when I'm excited about something, I talk louder or in like a more expressive way that may come off in a way that's completely unintended, like intense, for example, for others. Like I'm really excited, maybe I'm really intense, and it seems like I'm yelling at you, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm excited. So there's also the added, impulsivity, which is an executive function issue. So you're blurting out thoughts. So you're speaking before you're fully processing words. This happens to me when I'm like tripping over my words or like saying things out of order. Like you notice when I do that. And it's just because my thoughts are moving so fast that like my mouth can't keep up. And our kids do that too. How many times do we have to say, slow down? I can't understand what you said, because they'll start telling a story they're really excited about and they and what did you just say? Back up. I didn't hear that. And then they say it a second time. Oh, okay, gotcha. But it's just excitement, and their brains are working so fast. It just comes out like that. There's also struggling with social cues. So we've discussed this numerous times. After a social interaction, being like, I talk too much. So how many times I've asked you that is a bunch. But we'll talk about being told you talk too much in a minute too. So there's also the RSD, which is Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. So that's the fear of judgment that you get after speaking up. And for me, I experience this when this comes, in a social interaction. People think I'm being fake. And I've really worked through it in therapy and at other times, even just talking to you. There's this negative perception sometimes, like how could I feel so confident being myself and not caring about what other people think when I say something. And I think a lot of times it can come, days after a social interaction. Maybe it'll click, or, I just go, oh, like maybe they didn't like me as much as I thought. Like I thought we were getting along. Maybe they didn't like me. And then I start to go into, well, oh wow, I was too intense, or they thought I was fake, or, sometimes I've even heard in the past, like, oh, she's fake. There's no way, like, she actually feels confident speaking her mind, which I get it, because I think a lot of, if people are struggling with their own authenticity, or they're kind of like, oh, wow, I could never say that because I have a fear that people are judging me. But when I listen to my intuition and I say something to people I care about, like when I know something's off and I'll say something to someone I care about and I'm paying attention to that, it's met with I'm being negative or I'm crazy. So there's a bunch of different situations where this rejection sensitivity can show up. And a lot with ADHDers, it's getting that negative messaging with people not understanding how our brains work or how to be supportive or, you know, what's really going on. And I think, you know, we've even talked about that. What would the statistic be having an ADHDer who already receives 20,000 more negative messages than being that child also in a family scapegoating abuse situation. So the rejection sensitive situation is very like, I mean, there's a pattern of this happening. And so part of it is learned and part of it, sometimes maybe I'm feeling that way and that it's not even correct. It's just a perceived negative interaction. You talk too much, being labeled too much. So ADHDers are often labeled as too much, too loud, overbearing. Childhood experiences, for me, being shushed, punished, or ignored for excessive talking, called, you know, annoying, or nobody cares when you say something, or you ask a question and they ignore you, so then you ask it again and they're like, just shut up, nobody cares. Like, why do you need so much attention? Kind of messaging. So you start masking and you internalize self-doubt. So you're learning to kind of shrink yourself to avoid these negative reactions that you're receiving. And I would watch what others did to fit in. And sometimes I would try to mimic what they did, but there was always something in me that just would ache when I wasn't being authentic to myself. So even if I did, you know, for a short snippet of time, try to mimic or to be like, oh, you know what, let me just try that because maybe that will give me a more positive interaction. And maybe it might. And then afterwards I would feel guilty because then people would call me fake. And I was like, yeah, I was being fake because the last time I was with these people, I was ignored and shunned and I was too much. So the next time I show up to the interaction, I'm being like kind of quiet. And then it's like, oh, she was fake. And it turns just into this self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm just like, ugh. Then when I'm alone and it sets in, I'm like, man, I just wanted them to like me. So I tried to mimic the interactions that they were having because they like each other. And then once they let me in, they didn't just shut me out immediately, then they could get to know me. So I wasn't being fake. I was just trying to appease, to softly let them in. But I understand why they could think that that would, you know, be fake. It's like a lot of trauma built into like one small interaction, right? Then there's also the double standard. So if you think about it, extroverted neurotypicals are praised for the same things that ADHDers are criticized for. So, wow, they're honest. If an ADHDer is honest, they're rude. If you're really passionate, if you're an ADHDer, you're too dramatic. If you're hyper, they're like, you're childish, right? Or, oh, I wish I had her Angie. She's like Energizer Bunny. But if you have ADHD, it's like they're childish. You're too talkative. Well, she talks a lot. She's annoying. But if you need to fidget in order to focus, you don't care. You don't care what I'm saying. You're not listening to me. If you're emotional, and you have ADHD, you're a whiner. If you're an assertive neurotypical, you're aggressive when you're an ADHDer. So these are some of the things that you're just met with in trying to communicate as an ADHDer. So another part of being talkative is our natural curiosity, which we talked about in one of our first episodes a little bit. But curiosity is met with the response that you're being annoying. And your natural drive to ask why and how, not just what and where. You're shut down for questioning. You're being told you're disrespectful or you're challenging authority. And you're getting passive aggressive responses when you just ask for clarification on something. If, you're about to go somewhere and someone tells you where you're going. Oh, why are we going there? Because that's what we do. That's where we're going. It doesn't matter. Why do you care? It's like, oh, I was just asking. I just wanted to know. I just wanted to understand. And like a snarky sarcasm response when you're just genuinely asking a clarifying question. And this affects your confidence. So just like learning to suppress how much you're talking, and when you start to mask, you learn to suppress your curiosity out of fear. You're being told that your questions are dumb, when in reality, asking questions to understand is actually a sign of high intelligence, not trouble. But when people don't want to answer questions, you're a troublemaker. You're the problem, right? And we need to flip that on its head and reframing curiosity as a strength. I understand that, especially as parents, when we're overwhelmed or we're doing a bunch of things, getting asked a million questions about something when you're trying to focus on something else is a struggle. But when people are asking you questions, that's where ADHDers shine, where the innovation, the problem solving comes in. So you don't want to squash that in kids if you just pause and say, hey, can we write that down? I really want to hear what you're saying. Can we write that down so we can look it up later? How many times have we had to do that? Like there's just...
Today?
It's just questions. And it's great. Because the questions will stop. That's the whole thing that I think people don't understand. The questions will stop. And we'll go, okay. Or if someone's lying to us, we'll go, okay, I'll figure that out on my own, right? Like, they will stop. But I think the idea is that, oh my gosh, they're never going to stop. So I'm annoyed and I'm going to shut them down and make them feel bad. And we raise our kids to be unapologetic with their questions. Like, you never know where it's going to lead. A lot of times we're just so surprised at even where they're going with it. Even with me and you, I wasn't expecting that. But they aren't asking questions for no reason. They want to understand. They're asking you because they want to connect with you. And that's what's important. So we really need to reframe that as a strength.
And a lot of times we don't even know what the impetus for the question is. For
no idea
especially
where it came
with
from.
Otis, he'll be doing something in the back room, in the playroom, where he's doing some deep research on a planet or a historical person or something, and he'll come ask on what feels to us an off-the-wall question that, without any context, seems out of left field, and just why. The instinct is to be like, why do you need to know that? And he will have trouble explaining it. But so just kind of nurturing him through that, getting to the point, and then it'll be like, oh, thanks. I was trying to figure out this. And he'll tell us at the end, but there's no context before.
Pause
so
and say, what are you trying to look up? And then,
right.
Yeah. But he just wants to understand. And sometimes it can be a quick transition. He'll be talking about the Beatles, and then all of a sudden he comes in with a completely different question about Groundhog's Day. And I was, what?
Yeah.
Like, that was or, oh my gosh, I'm going to go do this now and switch and go do something else. So just let them be them. Let them ask. This is when their brains really need that support.
Right.
And learning these things and understanding helps them grow. Another part is justice sensitivity. I don't know how much we've talked about justice sensitivity, but calling out abuse. And many ADHDers have this strong internal sense of justice, being able to perceive injustices and unfairness more than our neurotypical friends. And we combine that with the emotional intensity and dysregulation that our brains naturally do. That's why you get this strong reaction to injustice. And again, we don't filter anything. It's like everything, it comes in, everything goes out. So it's really hard to separate yourself from problems of the world. You really have to do some behavioral tools to help support yourself for that. But when you're speaking out in toxic environments, so calling out unfair treatment and facing backlash because you spoke up, not only do we notice it more often, but we actually have a reaction to it and do something about it. That's the important part of it. So we want to do the right thing. We want to speak up when there's an injustice. We don't just see it, ignore it, and turn our heads. We can't do that. Our brains cannot do that. So we actually want to take action because it's emotionally motivating us. The CPTSD connection to that is having this past invalidation can make advocating for yourself and others harder. And, between our experiences as ADHDers being on the receiving end of bullying or, family scapegoating abuse, our intuition comes forward. And then the fact that our brains can't filter out even the slightest dishonesty. Our passion comes from us wanting to restore that justice. We know all too well the pain of being treated unfairly, and we do not feel okay when it's happening to someone else. And even to our own detriment sometimes. But what we're trying to do is do the right thing and speak up. And even if we are alone, we know that what we're doing matters. So with the justice sensitivity, you have to find that balance. And I think it's something that we've had to talk to our oldest about a little bit more, but learning to find when to speak up or when to protect your energy. And we talk to each other about that stuff too. This is really important, or you know what, just leave it be. It's gonna either work itself out or it's not our problem. We can't take that on. We don't have any control of that situation, whatever it is. But I think it's harder for kids when they're still growing and really learning who they are and their environment and stuff. And, we've had to talk to Wyatt about, I love that you want to stick up for your friend. I also want you to be safe. And here's what we need to do. Here's how you communicate with your teachers. Here's how you communicate with your friends so they can advocate for themselves and stuff like that. So,
but as many times as we've talked to him about, using your voice at the right times, we've also talked to him the same amount of times about how proud we are of how he is standing up for friends or standing up for himself, and how he interacts and conducts himself with people in places of authority, teachers, doctors.
Because, it's not like he's being disrespectful. He's standing up for himself, or he's asking a question, or he's asking for clarification. And he can already, at 10, read so clearly a toxic person.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see, because no, I don't want him doing things to get himself in trouble, but that's not what he's doing. And I see very clearly the way he's standing up for himself or his friends, or, allowing himself to understand what happened and how it's not his fault, and coming to us afterward and immediately wanting to tell us what happened, whether he's sad, whether he's upset, whether he's angry about it. He first comes and talks to us about it and wants to let us know, because he knows that we'll support him. And it doesn't mean in every situation there's not something we tell him, okay, I'm so proud of you for doing that. Here's one thing that next time, let's try to avoid doing that and focus more on this, or, whatever the situation is. But just being able to talk about it, talk through what you're feeling, and then you can decide what your next step is. So obviously listen to your gut. If there's an abusive situation, you need to get to somewhere safe. But communicate that you need space to process. You can journal, you can take a walk, whatever you need to do. But you decide what your next step is when you know what's going on, and what you can manage, what you need to handle, or what you need to just be at peace with. So using your voice for a positive impact, which is what we're doing for this podcast, is doing the self-advocacy at work, at school, in life, asking for accommodations or setting boundaries, opening communication. So it's helpful for you. It's helpful for people to get to know you. It's all of those things. Setting boundaries and opening up your communication is making sure everyone can be on the same team. Another thing is speaking up in relationships. So communicating needs without the fear of the other person thinking you're too much or saying you're too much, and recognizing relationships in which you can't communicate without fear, and deciding, do I need to continue that relationship because I can't show up as myself? Or finding a different approach when you're asking to speak about something important. I know with my intensity and my excitement or my justice sensitivity, sometimes I would come to you in moments where you weren't ready to have a conversation, and you would feel like almost this automatic defensive stance that didn't even need to be there, or wasn't even, something that you actually felt, but you took that stance because of my approach, because it was a lot at the wrong time, and I didn't approach it in the kindest way, really. But it wasn't meant maliciously. It was meant as I really want to talk about this. This is really bothering me. I want to talk it through because I feel safe with you. And then being met with defensive, you're too much, made me want to shut down. And that's not what you were meaning either. And I remember when my therapist was like, why don't you approach him and say, hey, do you have time to talk at some point today? It's something it's important to me, but, I love you. It's nothing, bad, or nothing that we can't work through. It's really important, and I just want to sit down and talk to you about it. And I was like, really? Do I need to do that? That's what I was thinking at first. But then okay, I got to try it, because what I'm doing right now isn't working. And I did it. And you were like, oh, yeah, is everything okay? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everything's okay. It's just something important that I want us to sit down and talk about, and I don't want to spring something on you. And you were like, absolutely. And then you were able to get into, whether we scheduled a time, you were able to get into a headspace where you were like, okay, let's sit down and talk. What do you need? And you automatically had this supportive stance. I was able to communicate in a calmer way even.
Yeah.
We
both had time to consider how we should be reacting in scenarios. I don't know. I mean, in those scenarios, you say, well, I wasn't ready to take that question or whatever. But yeah.
Same for me.
So
it
it's
could
top
happen
of mind.
reverse.
Yeah. I mean, it's top of mind for you. I want to get this out right now so that we can talk about it. And for me, or for whoever you're talking to, that person may be focused on 2 or 3 other things at that time. And so it does feel almost like an attack when you come to them and say, hey, we need to talk about this because this, and this. So
what if they're already overwhelmed? What if they're thinking about something really difficult and they're like half listening? Yeah. And I think, but seriously, if when you come to me and I'm like, okay, pause, I want to hear, or even the kids, pause, I want to hear what you're saying. I'm in the middle of something, or I really just need 5 more minutes and then we can talk, allows them to feel heard and not dismissed. And, same with us.
Yeah, no, it is a two-way street too, because I'm guilty of coming at you, I'll walk in your office and start asking you a question about something that we're supposed to do in 2 days. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm working.
And I'm working on today. I'm not that far ahead.
Right. Yeah. So it's, being more conscious of the urgency of what you need to talk about and how you approach it, I think is really important. I really, I either take a step back and I think, okay, is this something that has to be talked about right now, or could I just write it down?
Right,
and then at the end of the night, when we have our time to unwind and talk, bring out the list and say, hey, I needed to talk about these 2 things. I didn't want to bug you earlier. Can we chat right now?
Right. And really, like, I know ADHDers, we struggle with filtering. So like if sometimes it might feel like, oh, you need to talk. It's like immediately, are you mad at me? Or is there something going on? And so we'll just ask a clarifying question after. Yeah, is that like you said to me even, is everything okay? To be like, oh yeah, it's about this, because that's part of like a transition for your brain, even like you do your transitions throughout your day. It's allowing yourself, oh, okay, it's about this. I can shift and we can talk about that. Or you can go, oh yeah, I had some things I wanted to talk about around that same topic. Let's sit down and powwow later about that. You know what I mean? Like it all of a sudden becomes a much more safe form of communication when you're actually opening that up and offering, is this okay? And even, scheduling it, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is raising awareness for ADHD and mental health. So sharing experiences like we're doing here to help others. Like, these experiences helped me begin to heal. And, that's what we want to provide here is, I think, not being aware of certain things and just kind of going through the day, all of a sudden you become aware of something and you can shift your perspective, or, maybe you don't immediately shift your perspective, but you're more open to hearing more about it or learning more about it and taking the next step at actually understanding. Now you're not just aware. Now you want to understand a little bit deeper. And
I just want to say something there too, is like my raising or my awareness of ADHD helps me in those scenarios where, like what we just talked about, of the boy, like, the boys, it's a constant barrage of unfiltered thoughts and questions. Yeah. And like, so you can,
there's never a dull moment.
Right.
But it's fun and overwhelming. Right.
At your age, you're able to step back and say, okay, here's how I need to have a soft approach. Whereas the boys, they're still learning. And so it's just get everything out when I'm thinking it. And so it feels like a 1,000 mini attacks. It can, but my having that awareness it's not malicious. They just don't have a filter, and they're really trying to process all of this information, all of these thoughts, and really taking a step back and finding some humor in it, really trying to answer the questions to the best of your ability, because all of these things that they're learning about, I'm learning about too. I know more about the Beatles than I ever thought I would learn, and it's just because Otis is so interested in it and asking me so many questions, and and then that branches off into Buddy Holly and Otis Redding, and like all of these things that are connected for him. I'm having to field those questions with the understanding that he just wants to know. So like that'll help him move on.
And what's the alternative? you shut him down and he doesn't want to come to you. He doesn't want to talk to you. He doesn't want to tell you any of those things. If you want a connection with your kids, you don't do that.
Right.
You can't do that because kids will adapt. They will learn what they need to do. And the problem is they'll internalize it and feel like they did something wrong because their brain isn't capable as they're growing to realize, no, that person's being really mean and silencing me and belittling me. They do get to a point where they realize that and they're like, nope. I know what I was doing was right. That person was nasty. And, but they'll internalize it first and be like, what did I do wrong? And they shut down. They don't want to talk to you. So that's definitely not what healthy parents want. So the last thing that we're doing in order to use our voice and our too much talkative nature is to empower others who feel silenced. So encouraging other people to embrace their voice, empowering others to know their worth, to know they matter, to know that they deserve respect and kindness, allowing other people to show up authentically for who they are is the best way to support anyone. And it allows such a deeper connection when you're able to do that. And sometimes you have to ask what that looks like for them in order, taking those smaller steps to communicate, hey, could we talk about this? And then it opens it up to where every interaction, you don't even need the softer approach once you get to the place where you're trusting each other. Because trust builds. Trust isn't just given blindly. You build that trust through repetitive conversations and repairing and understanding and listening to each other. So we don't even have to do that, soft approach anymore. We're just like, hey, I need to talk about this. Can we do it at this time? Yep, because we believe each other and we support each other and we love each other and we show that we care. So it's not a threat. It's no longer a threat that we feel like we have to respond to or we have to fight.
Right.
So when you feel silenced, when you find those safe people and you keep building that trust, it's so important. And, I really encourage people to use their voice. I know there's certain situations where it's dangerous, and I know I had to stay silent for a while for my own healing. But once you find the safe space to move forward, really nurture that with that person. And I'm so much stronger today because of our connection and building that, that trust and that safety, and you allowing me to be who I am, and same for you and our kids. It's such a more enjoyable life experience. There's a lot more confidence, a lot more flow, even in chaotic, really talkative, overwhelming situations. Overall, it just feels so much more safe. So closing out here, we want to talk about how speaking up is a strength. It is not a flaw. And you can be silent to process, but speak up for the truth. Stand up for yourself and grow your self-awareness. Understand right from wrong. Understand the things that you're feeling, why you're uncomfortable, why you're angry, what's happening, what's going on, and really reflect on that. ADHDers bring passion, curiosity, and fairness to conversations. Just own it. If you're doing that, own it. There's nothing wrong with it. Speak up, because if what you had to say didn't matter, other people wouldn't be trying so hard to silence you. Those people who feel intimidated by your authenticity and, people who are different than they are, they're the ones who need more time for self-reflection on what they're experiencing. Don't let them take away your light your energy, your excitement. You being too much has more to do with them, for sure, than believing that you're not enough. Like, you be you. The people, when you're yourself and you reflect and you're self-aware and you understand what's going on and you know that you're a good person and yes, you make mistakes, but you're showing up and you're doing the work, you can be confident going into these situations, and it's a strength. So I'd love to see how, if you've experienced any of these things, please share with us. Maybe you were silenced at one time and you found your voice, like what you did, or things like personal stories from you. I'd love to hear of, situations that you went through that are similar, that maybe we could help each other and cheer each other on. So, anything else?
No.
Speak up. All right. Bye for now.